present a video from my vault. The shadows of Blackthorn High. Blackthorn High had always carried an air of mystery, its Gothic architecture looming like a sentinel over the small fog-drenched town of Ravens Hollow. Of hauntings whispered through the corridors, passed down by generations of students. They spoke of shadows that moved without light, and a ghostly figure known only as the Keeper. It was the beginning of autumn when 5 students decided to investigate the truth behind the tales. Each of them had their reasons. Emma, the aspiring journalist hungry for a gripping story. Lucas, the skeptic determined to debunk the myths. Nora, the shy girl drawn to the supernatural. Dylan, the prankster seeking thrills. And Claire, the history buff who believed the legends were rooted in fact. The group chose a Friday night, the perfect time to explore the school unnoticed. As the clock struck midnight, they gathered at the entrance, flashlights in hand. It was colder than usual, and the wind howled through the trees, carrying the scent of damp earth. "This is going to be amazing," Dylan said, his voice betraying a hint of nervousness. "Just don't scream and run at the first creak of a door." They entered through a side door Claire had discovered in an old blueprint of the school. The building's interior was eerily quiet, save for the occasional groan of the wooden floorboards. Motes floated in the air, illuminated by their flashlights. As they made their way to the auditorium, the supposed epicenter of the hauntings, a sudden thud echoed down the corridor. They froze. "Probably just a rat," Lucas muttered, though his grip on the flashlight tightened. When they reached the auditorium, it was clear something was wrong. The temperature plummeted, their breath visible in the cold air. The massive chandelier overhead swayed gently, though there was no draft. "Look at the stage," Nora whispered, pointing. A single chair sat in the center, and on it rested a tarnished music box. It began to play on its own, the haunting melody filling the room. The group exchanged uneasy glances. "Who's there?" Emma called out, her voice echoing. The answer came in the form of footsteps, slow, deliberate, and far too heavy to belong to any of them. They turned toward the sound, but the corridor behind them was empty. Then came the whispers, faint and unintelligible, like a chorus of unseen voices. Suddenly, the door slammed shut. The chandeliers swaying intensified, casting erratic shadows on the walls. One shadow, darker and more defined than the others, began to stretch and rise. It took on a humanoid form, its featureless face turning toward the group. "The Keeper," Claire gasped, backing away. The figure stepped forward, its movements unnaturally fluid. The air grew oppressive, the whispers escalating into a cacophony. Desperate to capture evidence, but the shadow lunged toward her, and the camera fell from her hands, shattering on the floor. "Run!" Lucas shouted. He sprinted down the corridor, the shadow in pursuit. Shut as they passed, trapping them in a labyrinth of hallways. Dylan tripped, his flashlight rolling away. As he scrambled to his feet, the shadow loomed over him. He screamed as it enveloped him, and then there was silence. Remaining 4 burst into the library, slamming the door behind them. They to barricade it with a bookshelf. "There has to be something here about how to stop it," she said, frantically searching through the dusty tomes. Eyes widened as she pulled out an old journal. "This mentions the Keeper. The music box. To destroy it." "How?" Lucas asked, panic in his voice. Before she could answer, The shadow began seeping throughout the cracks in the door. Grabbed the journal, scanning for instructions. Fire! It says fire can break the bond. They raced back to the auditorium, the shadow hot on their heels. Grabbed the music box and hurled it to the ground, but it didn't break. "We need more," she cried. Bang it against the box while Claire lit the torn curtains with a lighter. The flames spread quickly, the heat forcing them to retreat. As the fire consumed the music box, the shadow let out an ear-piercing scream before dissipating into nothingness. The group stumbled out of the school, coughing and gasping for air. They watched as the flames consumed the auditorium, fire trucks arriving in the distance. Blackthorn High was closed indefinitely, the story of the fire overshadowing the truth of what happened that night. The surviving students knew better. The keeper was gone, but the scars it left would never fade. And somewhere, beneath the rubble of the burned auditorium, the faint melody of a music box could still be heard. The students' stories didn't end when they fled the building. In the days following the fire, each of them was haunted in subtle ways. Fragments of the music box melody embedded in her recordings, playing softly whenever she reviewed her footage. Lucas's dreams were plagued by visions of the shadow, its faceless form reaching out to him. Nora began noticing strange symbols drawn in the condensation on her windows, symbols that matched those in the journal. Claire discovered scorch marks on the books she had taken home, as though the fire had followed her. Driven by fear and curiosity, the four gathered at Claire's house to piece together what they had experienced. They spent hours combing through the journal, deciphering its cryptic text. It hinted at an ancient ritual that could ensure the keeper would remain dormant, but it required a personal sacrifice from each of them. What kind of sacrifice? Dylan's absence weighed heavily on them, his fate a grim reminder of the stakes. Nora read aloud. It says, "Something precious must be given, something tied to who we are." As the group debated their next steps, they noticed the faint scent of smoke filling the room. The shadows seemed to lengthen, creeping toward them as if alive.